Hello and welcome to History After All's very first book review in English, where we will be reviewing George Gawrych's relatively recently released the biography of Ataturk called Ataturk, Father of the Republic of Turkey, which was published by IB Tauris in 2023 for the centenary of the Turkish Republic, we believe. First of all, a very brief introduction to what History After All is. History After All is, as you can tell, a YouTube channel. It's a spin-off of Books After All, which only operates in Turkish currently and is a website focused on literature, culture, art, and books in general. But History After All is operating through YouTube in both English and Turkish. Although admittedly we make far fewer videos in English that we do in Turkish, but we aim to do more. History After All aims to be a semi-academic YouTube channel where we talk about history and political sciences and social science in an academic fashion, but with a casual twist. We don't believe YouTube is the primary place for academia, and it's not the primary outlet for academic production. So we aim for this place to be a place where we can just chat about things that interest and excite us, and where we can talk about history and political sciences and current developments and whatnot. So welcome. We will be doing book reviews, article reviews, and special presentations, and we call them special dossiers and special presentations, and we will be doing guest appearances and some other kinds of videos that we may not have prepared yet. This is, as I said, this is our very first book review in English, so please excuse our excitement and anxiety, and we hope it'll be enjoyable and beneficial for you. We wanted to start with a book that focuses on the founder of modern Turkey, not least because he is one of my main areas of interest, areas of research, and is no stranger, let's say, to any Turkish historian who focuses on modern Turkish history. So before we talk about the book itself, let me introduce you to my partner here, Zeynep. Hello. She will be my partner in crime for mostly for the majority of the videos that we record in English. And again, this is our very first one, so it's extremely good to see you here. And before we start off with the book, would you like to very briefly summarize for us who Ataturk was and why he is important? You don't have to go into too much detail, just a very brief summary is enough. I will go into a little bit more detail after you pave the way for me.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to History After All. As you said, John, it's our first video that we record in English, so bear with us, please. And as for Ataturk, well, he was first known as Mustafa and then later Mustafa Kemal, founder of Turkish Republic, modern Turkey. He was born in Salonika, it was called back then, in 1881. He was an Ottoman child. His main occupation was a soldier. He, like I said, founded to modern Turkey. You could say he was founding father of modern Turkey. And other than that, he had been a trailblazer of his age, of his time. He was a statesman, but beforehand, he was a soldier who didn't believe the necessity of war unless it was vital for the national survival, which was a peculiar phenomenon back then in late 19th and early 20th century. He passed away in 1938 at a very young age, in his 50s, after founding but not finishing with the Republic of Turkey as we see today.
Thank you very much. This is the gist of it. Ataturk is, or for a lot of Turkish historians, depending on the period, we'd like to call him Mustafa Kemal, because up until 1934, Turkish people did not have surnames. And the main reason that we do now is Ataturk himself. And Ataturk means broadly, it's a unique word. You don't see the kind of word formation that the surname has today, but it generally or broadly means the father of the Turks or the ancestor of the Turks. So it was a surname given to him out of respect for his revolutionary activities, let's say. Mustafa Kemal, as you said, was an Ottoman soldier, and he was a modernist and a nationalist. His rise through the ranks of the Ottoman army, first as a student, military student, then as an officer, and then as a general, coincided with the late 19th century, early 20th century development of Turkish nationalism. And there was this struggle for Turkish independence, let's say, or breaking the yoke of foreign influence over the Ottoman Empire or over Turkey. The main nationalist agenda of the time.
If I may add, not only influence, but dominance upon the Crimean War of 19th century, late 19th century. It was more like a dominance of the Entente powers, England, France. It was a dominance that tied the hands of the Ottoman Empire.
The Ottoman Empire was never formally or officially colonized by European powers. The Turkish lands were never formally a colony, but for all intents and purposes, Anatolia and the Ottoman Empire was a semi-colony. It was absolutely dependent on that European power or this European power. That's why most administrations felt need to side with a major European power, which is why the Committee of Union and Progress, I don't want to say proto-nationalists, but when you, in the context of the Turkish Republic, the Committee of Union and Progress kind of count as proto-nationalists. So that's why the Committee of Union and Progress allied themselves with Germany in the First World War. And Mustafa Kemal's rise through the ranks of the Ottoman army coincided with these developments and these struggles for Turkish independence or Turkish identity. And Turkey was back then definitely, whatever you call it, it was not a modern country by today's standards. And what the Kemalist Revolution, or what the Turkish Revolution, or what the Turkish War of Independence plus the Republic of Turkey achieved was to modernize and revolutionize Turkey and turn it into what you see today. Or it wasn't the intention. It wasn't the intention to turn it into the Turkey that you see today, but turning it into a modern nationalist state that could coexist with European powers and Asian powers and the former enemies of the Ottoman Empire, and even the former enemies or the foundational enemies of the Turkish Republic were made peace with, and the aim was to coexist with them as a sovereign, independent nation state, a modern nation state. So in nation building, modernization, reforms and revolutions in language, education, women's rights, as Gawrych points out, in a lot of areas, the aim for the Kemalist Revolution was to create a new society, a new country, a new set of conditions for the Turkish people to exist in. So Mustafa Kemal was an Ottoman general in the later stages of the First World War, and the Ottoman Empire was defeated in the First World War. And the Treaty of Sèvres and the great powers, the major powers of Europe, wanted to partition the Ottoman Empire. And in an act of resistance, the Turkish people organized themselves into committees and bands and resisted the invasion and occupation and disintegration of the land by force of arms and by force of politics. And Mustafa Kemal, as a general of the Ottoman army, um, transferred himself over to Anatolia and unified these hitherto unorganized bands of resistance into a integrated, unified, joint national movement for independence. And he founded in the First World War ended in 1918, and in 19 right after the end of the First World War, Turkish lands were occupied by British and French forces and Italian forces, and later by Greek forces, who were not a part of the enemy alliance in the First World War, but were given a share of the Ottoman lands in line with their expansionist ideals, the Megali ideal. It's a whole other thing. We may end up making a special presentation on the Turkish War of Independence, and maybe even book reviews in English as well.
We absolutely will.
And what the Kemalist movement or the nationalist movement of the era did was unify these acts of resistance, unorganized acts of resistance, into one national movement, and they effectively created a new government and a new state in Ankara in 1920, in the April of 1920. And as soon as the new state in Ankara was created, it was aimed to be a revolutionary government, a revolutionary state, not least because it was based on the authority of a Grand National Assembly, which, while legally and legitimately did not, effectively and essentially renounced the authority of the Sultan over the Anatolian lands. And this...
And also based on national sovereignty.
Yes.
Sovereignty of the nation, the people itself.
Yes. The authority of the people and the sovereignty of the nation. And this political revolutionary movement and the independence movement went hand in hand. And together with them, the initial phases of Kemalist modernization. There was a basis for Turkish modernization, absolutely. But Kemalist modernization was much more comprehensive, much more focused on the national lands of Turkey, and much more radical in its methods and aims. So the Turkish War of Independence, as well as the Turkish political revolution, was it wasn't concluded, but it was brought to a major success in 1922 when the invading Greek armies were defeated. And this was the basis of a new sovereign independent Turkish nation. And the Grand National Assembly formed the basic establishment upon which the newer reforms and revolutions would rest. The Kemalist Revolution began its series of revolutions and reforms to enlighten, to develop, to improve the living conditions of the Turkish people while building a modern nation as we understand today. So Mustafa Kemal was at the center of all of these things. He was a modernist and nationalist and a Republican, for as far as we can see. He aimed to bring out a national Turkish state out of the disintegrating empire, and his initial records of him stating the necessity of such a national state go as far back as 1905. So his Republican ideals, his not by today's standards, but the standards of the period, his democratic ideals, his nationalistic and independent ideals, and also the revolutionary aspect of his popular beliefs, insistence upon counting on a popular movement within the Turkish lands throughout Anatolia made up the basis of the Kemalist Revolution. So it was all a comprehensive revolutionary process that can be divided into different eras and different periods and different aspects. But as a historian, my personal belief and my personal approach towards the historical period is it was one revolutionary process,
A
which,
holistic view, you could say.
yeah, you could, in a holistic approach, you have to give it to the period that it was a comprehensive, a unified, well-integrated process of revolution, a series of revolutions, the main aims of which were the modernization, nationalization, and the establishment of a popular authority over the authority of the Sultan, who had ruled over the lands for almost 600 years. So if anybody asks you what exactly was revolutionary about the Turkish Revolution, you could remind them a sultan had been ruling over the lands for 600 years. So it was, the Ottoman Empire was disintegrating by itself, but it was a complicated and complex historical process which brought about the end of the empire and replaced it with a Turkish nation state. And as I said, Mustafa Kemal, or Ataturk, stood right at the center of it as its leader and its designer in some aspects. Of course, he did have a historical basis. So he is also the main subject of George Gawrych's biography, Ataturk, Father of the Republic of Turkey. First off, the title is very clearly an homage to Andrew Mango's book. Andrew Mango's biography of Ataturk is very famous both in Turkey and out of Turkey. It's called Ataturk, the Father of Modern Turkey, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So it could be argued that George Gawrych is paying homage to Andrew Mango, which is considered the quintessential biographical work on Ataturk. The problem with Ataturk's biographies in English is that most of them are written by foreign scholars. I'm not aware, except for Salahi Sonyal's very short biographical work, I'm not aware of any biographical work about Ataturk in English written by a Turkish scholar. This is a problem because very naturally a foreigner's conception, a foreigner's understanding and grasp of the historical period, no matter how well they know of the period, no matter how much of an expert they are, it sometimes does not match that of a Turkish historian. So while the contributions by foreign historians and authors are invaluable, we still have the problem of producing more Ataturk biographies in English as original pieces of work. So we will be focusing on George Gawrych's biography, and we will be focusing on how it works as a biography, and we will try to go over his main arguments and what works and what does not. Would you like to take over?
It's okay. I can talk about Gawrych a little. He's a professor of history in, I believe, right now, Baylor University of the United States, or he recently had been working there. And he's a historian of the Middle Eastern region. His previous works focused mostly on this region, and I believe one of the books he authored was about Arab-Israeli War of 1973. And afterwards, he wrote another one about the Ottoman rule in the Balkans, how it started to collapse in the late 19th century. And his first Ataturk book actually is not this one. I believe a decade ago, in 2013, he authored a book titled The Young Ataturk, From Ottoman Soldier to Statesman of Turkey, focusing on early years of Mustafa Kemal's life as an Ottoman soldier, as we mentioned. And this book, you brought this one to our attention. It was published last year, right? summer of last year.
Fall, I think.
In
Fall of last year, I think.
fall. Okay. Yeah, it was. It's a very recent work of research, but we'll see. Yeah, let's just not start criticism right over. And it has 11 chapters, beginning with making of an Ottoman general, Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal's life in the Ottoman army, and ends with his greatest work, Republic of Turkey. So, as you brought this one to our attention, what's his Gawrych's take on Ataturk? And what do you think about it?
Okay, so if I could go over the chapters very briefly, there are,
Sure.
as you said, 11 chapters. The final chapter, the 11th chapter, effectively acts as a conclusion because as far as I can tell, it doesn't have a separate conclusion. The first, in the introduction, he states that the first 3 chapters are biographical and chronological, and then the other chapters follow a thematic approach to various aspects of the Turkish Republic. But in reality, I think the first 4 chapters are biographical and at least loosely follow a chronological framework. So, what Gawrych does here is interesting. The first chapter is the making of an Ottoman general, focusing on Atatürk's development from childhood to the Ottoman soldier that we know. And the second chapter is called Balancing the Art of Statesman and Commander-in-Chief, where he focuses on Atatürk's period in the National War of Independence, or there are many names in Turkish for the War of Independence, the Turkish War of Independence, one of which is the national struggle, milli mücadele. And Gawrych very commonly uses that term. And the second chapter focuses on Atatürk's activities in the national struggle. And the third chapter is focuses on the foundations of the Republic. It's called Founding the Republic. And the fourth chapter is called Consolidating Political Power, which brings us to the end of the biographical part of the book. So it coincides roughly with the half of the book. So it's almost as if the book is divided into half, where the first one is focusing on a biographical approach within a chronological perspective, and the second part is focusing on different aspects of the Kemalist Revolution. I'm calling it the Kemalist Revolution. I'm not sure if Gawrych ever calls it the Kemalist Revolution in the book. I'm not sure. For me, the correct terming is the Kemalist Revolution or the Turkish Revolution, but you could call it a lot of things. But as I said, it's one unified revolutionary process. So the Kemalist Revolution sounds much better and much more logical to my ear. And the second part of the book, the thematic chapters include one, the fifth chapter, constructing a Turkish identity and nation, which focuses on the nationalist aspect of the Turkish Republic, and it very briefly touches upon the roots of Turkish nationalization or nationalism. And the sixth chapter is called Institutionalizing Laicism. And the seventh chapter is Enlightening the People, focusing on the reforms and revolutions in the educational area. Sorry. And the eighth chapter is Expanding Women's Rights, which was a major aspect of the Kemalist Revolution and the earlier periods of the Republican era of Turkey, or the Republic of Turkey during the Ataturk period. The ninth chapter is called Fostering Economic Development and Health, focusing on the state policies to develop the economic establishment of Turkey and developing the general well-being of the nation. And the 10th chapter is called Securing a Place in the World, focusing on the foreign policy, considerably peaceful foreign policy of the period. And the 11th chapter, as I said, effectively acts as a conclusion is called Reflecting on Ataturk and the Republic. So this is a general overview of the chapters which we wanted to go over. And the general methodology of the book, as I said, is to divide the book into two parts, two main parts. The first one is biographical, the second one is more thematic. But the interesting part for me is, while the book starts off interestingly enough, the first 3 or 4 chapters are basically more or less a retelling of the young Ataturk, George Gawych's previous book. At least period-wise, they are. Because he doesn't go beyond late 1920s and very early 1930s. And instead, he passes the ball over to the thematic chapters, which creates the impression, or for lack of a better word, the illusion that the thematic chapters coincide chronologically with the end of the 1920s and the beginning of 1930s, while in reality they don't. So there is this divide and there is this gap between a narrative gap, a narrative divide between the two halves of the book. It's an interesting choice to make for a biography, because in my experience and in my perception, for a biography to work well, you have to create a unified, well-flowing, seamless narrative. I mean, it doesn't have to be seamless, but it does have to flow well. And the chapters do have to click well with each other. But an interesting choice George Gawrych makes is not bringing the biographical framework all up to the point where Mustafa Kemal loses his life. If he had completely written a narrative biography in the first half of the book, and then switched over to an analytical perspective, focusing on various aspects of the Republic, it might have made more sense. When you cut your biography in half and lean on or depend on separate analytical chapters, logically, a reader might expect you to make these separate chapters as independent or
standalones, you know.
Or yeah, you would expect them to be standalones. You would expect them to go deep enough and be academic enough or bring about enough context in each and every one of the subjects that you focus on. But as it is, the biography isn't complete. The biography stops at the 1930s, and Mustafa Kemal passes away in 1938, right before the outbreak of the Second World War, during the right after the Munich crisis. And the second chapter, or the second part, is, in my eyes, insufficient in focusing on different aspects of the revolution. And they are expected to act as separate articles, separate papers, let's say, but they don't go deep enough. They have this feeling of shallowness to them. Therefore, the general methodology of the book, in my eyes, is a bit problematic. The biographical aspect of the book is mostly accurate. You can safely, in general, you can generally safely reference this book about Turkey's War of Independence or the Ataturk period.
Foundation process, yeah.
But is it the primary reference book that you would look for? Probably not, mainly because of this methodology. Had this book been, I don't know, twice its page count, and if Gawrych went deep enough for each and every different aspect of the revolution, then a longer book would have required him to include more perspectives or different approaches, which might have provided the reader with further context and more academical understanding of the period. But they are all standalones, or they are acting as standalones, or
They're not
disguising
though.
themselves as standalones, but they don't really stand alone all that well. They have this feeling of shallowness, as I said.
So we could say you're underimpressed.
I'm underwhelmed.
All right.
I'm underimpressed and underwhelmed. So the biographical section, if you're focusing on Atatürk's younger era, you can cite it, you can read it, it will give you some information. It's not the definitive biography. It cannot be the definitive biography. It's incomplete. But if you're focusing on a younger Atatürk, and if you're intent on not going for the young Atatürk itself, I mean the book, this one will give you a biographical
sense
background. Yeah.
Yeah.
It will do its work. It will do its job. But the thematic section, even if you can look through the general, at least to my eyes, incompatibility between the two halves, the thematic section, I believe, is the more problematic one.
I think, if I may, I don't think you could just easily deconstruct and make these themes, these episodes standalone. Because you see, as you said, the Kemalist Revolution, the Turkish Revolution, is a holistic process which aims to create a nation that can both govern itself, protect itself, and serve itself. And these aims requires the consolidation of all these themes, like the creation of a Turkish national identity, which had existed before the founding of the Republic, especially afterwards, the First World War, and maybe even after Balkan Wars, before that. And creating a secular state, and also creating a nation that is enlightened enough to govern itself, and creation of gender equality in the nation, and also creation of a nation that can sustain itself without just being a mandate of a greater power. All these I mentioned was the general aim of the Kemalist Revolution, and I don't think you can just divide them as they were different, very varied things, very separate things.
The problem isn't in and of itself the division of different subjects and themes into different chapters. I mean, any academic work has to divide. You have to have chapters. You have to have different perspectives.
But it's how the division is made.
Yeah, how it works is
the problem.
Yeah, how it works is the problem. If you have a biography, it's a biography. If the book was titled Essays on the Foundation of the Modern Republic of Turkey, it would have made more sense. But then still, the thematic chapters, to work as separate and standalone essays, would have to go deeper, would have to have more and better resources.
Background information is
more context,
much more
background information, more argumentation, more discussion. That's what you expect, at least as junior academics or aspiring academics. These are the kind of things that are expected from us.
From us, yeah, absolutely.
But
considering we're writing a paper,
these people aren't worried about these things.
Yeah,
that comes with the territory of being a professor. It comes with the status of being a professor. I don't mean to disrespect George Gawrych. Most of his historical narrative does have merit.
Yeah.
He does tell a mostly accurate history, but he does have minor errors and minor omissions which do add up. And at the end, to my eyes, the general portrait of Ataturk or Mustafa Kemal, to me, is incomplete. This may be due to...
Can you give a few examples on the not missing, but errors? Not missing parts, but errors,
I mean, any kind of nonfiction work, even fiction work, any kind of nonfiction work will have errors. I don't need to nitpick. But for example, when you omit or when you gloss over, in 1921, the Greek army invaded much of Anatolia or Western Anatolia, and the nationalists' capital was in Ankara, which is the current capital still of Turkey. The invading Greek army was tasked with crushing the nationalist rebellion, so to say, or the nationalist resistance, to impose the Treaty of Sèvres that partitioned the Ottoman Empire onto the people of Anatolia, onto the Turkish people. And the Treaty of Sèvres was officially signed and accepted by it wasn't ratified by the Ottoman parliament. It couldn't have been because there wasn't a parliament back then.
It was dissolved.
It was dissolved.
The parliament was dissolved, yeah.
When the invading Greek army came to the doorstep of Ankara, because they were tasked by the Allied powers, and it was in their own interest to crush the Turkish nationalism, to achieve their own expansionist idea of megalithea, to occupy Ankara and dissolve the Grand National Assembly as well. Suddenly, Mustafa Kemal became commander-in-chief of the Turkish military, Turkish army. Gawrych glosses over how that happened. In reality, it can be seen as a minor detail, but as I said, these things add up. These things erode the historical context if not put in a proper spot.
Context, which is something he underlines a lot.
That's interesting. That's interesting. You emphasize the importance of context, and then you go and write different chapters on different aspects of a revolutionary republic, and then, in my opinion,
kind of messing with the context in the meantime. Yeah.
And in my opinion, some of the subtitles in these chapters are out of place. I mean, I will get back to the minor errors part, but another problem I have with the thematic architecture of the book, the design of the book, is, for example, the language revolution, the language reform, let's say, is placed under the constructing a Turkish identity and nation chapter. I mean, yes,
technically,
that makes sense, but there is also a separate enlightening the people chapter.
Yeah.
As I said, when I mean you have to approach it holistically, it's a unified, well-integrated revolutionary process, means nationalism and enlightening the people and popular politics and caring about the well-being of the people, the economic developments, they all go hand in hand. You can...
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but they are so intertwined that maybe it is not, he initially thought that it would be easy to, to mention them by chapter and thematically approach the process. But I don't think these are separate enough to do that. They are so intertwined, like you mentioned, the linguistic reform, the modernization of Turkish alphabet, and even women's rights issue. They're so intertwined that in the end, they all go hand in hand, go towards one single aim that had different branches. So I think they are too intertwined to approach thematically. That's what I think. That's why I wouldn't do that, you know.
You can absolutely approach them thematically, but as we said previously, it's not whether you do it, it's how you do it. When you come to think about it, what he does, building a biographical narrative and then focusing on different aspects of the so and so, it's not groundbreaking. It's been done before. But why is it more problematic here than in a lot of other biographies that were written in Turkish? Maybe I'm exaggerating the problem. I don't want to, as I said, I don't want to nitpick, I don't want to be disrespectful. But for me, a lot of context is missing. As I said, the minor errors part. The invasion of 1921, I will close off this parentheses. The invasion of 1921 ended up being the excuse of Mustafa Kemal to be ascended to the position of commander-in-chief of the Turkish army.
Yeah.
What Gawrych and a lot of foreigners do is claim or gloss over the period and make it seem like that Mustafa Kemal somehow manipulated the National Assembly to give them these rights and authority, give them
bended them to his own will, so you say.
That's how it feels like when you read the section, the related section. But this isn't the whole reality. It's not a big issue. It's not a major problem in any way. But as I said, these minor errors or omissions add up and lead up to an incomplete portrait of Ataturk. So what happened was his opponents were extremely sure of a defeat, and they wanted him to take charge and be responsible for the defeat. Then they would have more authority and they would have more opportunities to decide on the future of the Grand National Assembly and hence the...
Basically, Mustafa Kemal Pasha could be the scapegoat for the defeat. And they could say, you know, just because of this guy, you know, we should just get rid of him or say.
And if it's a biography, and it's claiming to be a biography, Mustafa Kemal himself limited his dictatorial powers of being commander-in-chief to 3 months. And every 3 months, he pleaded with the Grand National Assembly to extend the period of his authority.
Yeah.
And if you gloss over this, he will seem like a dictator. If you point at him and call him a dictator, you're writing a biography. You have the right to do that. It wouldn't make you historically accurate or right or correct, but you could do that. But then you would be asked to give enough historical context. By the way, George Gawrych doesn't properly, or it's not one of his main arguments that Ataturk was dictatorial.
What do you think about how he makes use of his resources, his primary and secondary resources? What do you think about that?
I will have to give it to him that he uses Turkish sources, and some of them are in Ottoman Turkish and most of them are in Latinized Turkish, modern Turkish. And for a foreigner to use Turkish primary sources, I mean, I'm grateful, to say the least. The resources aren't the problem, but his writing, I'm not convinced that his writing flows all that well. At places it seems uninspired. As you said, it might have been the aim of this book to make it to the centenary of the Turkish Republic. So it might have been rushed, it might have been uninspired, it might have been... Again, if the book was titled Essays or various aspects of the Turkish Republic or the Ataturk period, then the whole logic of the book would have been inverted or changed, but it could have, with a little bit more work, it could have worked better.
Because it's like you have lots to say about the topic. You have major things to say, lots to mention. You want to mention each and every one of them, like we just did, you kind of sometimes miss the forest while looking at individual trees. And I think that's what the narration problem in this book. He kind of misses the entirety of the forest by looking at individual trees one by one.
Could be, could be. And as I said, that might be the reason why I felt the portrait of Ataturk as a grand total was incomplete or felt incomplete.
Yeah.
As I said, I have problems with the architecture, the writing in general, but what you would walk away with from this book is a mostly accurate grasp of Mustafa Kemal and his period and his state that he founded. But your perception, if you're basing it entirely off of this book, would very likely be lacking. As I said, the portrait of Ataturk isn't wrong, inaccurate per se, or incorrect per se, but it's lacking due to a lot of different reasons. The Turkish nationalism chapter has a lot of noteworthy passages, but it also lacks a lot of context, both historical and contemporary, regarding its own period.
Yeah, I get it.
And the separate chaptering of separate facets of the Turkish Revolution or the Kemalist Revolution, it could have worked. It could have been made to work with a variety of methods. But as it is, I, for one, as a reader and as a young historian, if I'm allowed to call myself that, I'm underwhelmed. It leaves much to be desired. Having a complete portrait, it's not possible, of course, but at least within your own narrative, having a complete and thorough and comprehensive and well-established and well-supported portrait of an historical figure should be one of the main aims of a biography. And I'm not sure how much of it is achieved here. Some might be looking for exactly what this book is offering. I, for one, wasn't. But for me, it left much to be desired. Would you like to say a few words about the 8th chapter?
Very briefly, I could mention how the context situation we talked about multiple times just brings my attention to itself. As you said, the Turkish Revolution was a part of a modernization process predating 1923, the actual proclamation of the Republic. And the contextualization of the women's rights issue, I found that quite problematic due to several sentences. And one of them was actually, he mentions how the Ataturk drew inspiration from the Western civilization, but he also built what he did on the progressive developments of the late Ottoman Empire, what we call second constitutional period, between the reinforcement of the Ottoman constitution in the fall of 1908 and the abolishment of Sultanate in 1922 by the Grand National Assembly. And Gawrych mentions a few reforms conducted throughout those 14 years, and how Ataturk and his revolutions are based on the foundations set in those 14 years. But he forgets to mention that these reforms conducted in second constitutional era was limited to almost solely to urban areas such as Istanbul, Salonika, as it was called, where Ataturk came from, and Izmir of Western Anatolia. And it was more so impossible for Turkish women to get a parallel education to a Turkish man. And the World War allowed women to come forward with regard to public life globally. But in Turkey, in the Ottoman Turkey, this was more so limited to Turkish women living in urban areas. Turkish women in Anatolia still kept working on their fields with the animals, they raised. And there had been, he forgets to mention that also, there had been in the first Turkish parliament, the Grand National Assembly established in 1920 in Ankara. There were champions of women's rights, a very few of them, not even a handful of them. And the opposite party against women's rights had a louder voice, but they still did exist. And he introduces several feminist icons of Turkish feminism, like Halide Edip, Latife Hanım, Latife Uşakizade, wife of Ataturk, and Nezihe Muhiddin. Nezihe Muhiddin is an interesting woman. I think we should talk about her in Turkish and in English as well, because she was a trailblazer and a woman of many talents, a good author, a good speaker, and he was a women's rights activist throughout the second constitutional era. And afterwards, she continued her efforts in Republican era as well. While talking about her, Gawrych says, and I'm quoting him, while spouting a notion of gender equality, Ataturk was in no mood to allow for any political involvement of women. I think that could be a misrepresentation of the year. Because yes, Nezihe was a woman of many talents, and one of the things she did was one of the founding members of Kadınlar Halk Fırkası, Women's Public Party, which was the first political party of Turkey, actually. It was founded right after the proclamation of the Republic in 1924, but the Home Office of the nation, the Minister of Interior, did not permit.
It was an official political party, right? It wasn't a...
It was just proclaimed to be founding, they announced that they were founding the party, but the Home Office did not permit the party to be founded, and it remained a stillborn attempt. And Gawrych claims Ataturk foiled this attempt. And I think, like I said, it would be the misrepresentation of the year. It could be, because I could base my arguments in a long context, but I could just say that just look at the parliamentary minutes, official records of the parliament between 1920 and 1924. And please go forward to that and look at up until 1930, which was the date Turkish women were allowed to attend local elections. Even his close circle, even Ataturk's close circle, which was the people who still are seen as national heroes, as founding fathers, men who had been with him throughout the entirety of the World War, of the proclamation of the Republic, of the entirety of the revolutionary process. They were not for that right. They did not support the women's rights issue. This we can say. This we can see in the parliamentary minutes. And as for the attempt of the founding of the Women's People's Party in 1924, that was a date. Even the civil code of the Republic was not put into effect. Even the secularization of educational system, the law system entirety, nothing was republicanized, you know. And women hadn't been given equal rights, let alone participate in politics and founding a women's people's party. And how can I say that Ataturk supported the women's rights? Well, we could just look at many speeches he had given between 1920 and even further, up until his death in 1938. He did not once spoke against any sort of women's rights, none whatsoever. And in one of them, in a speech he gave in Kastamonu, actually, on August of 1925, he declares this following, and please excuse my hurried translation. A society is composed of two sexes, men and women. Is it even possible to improve only one part of society? Just tolerate the other part as it was? And could a society progress wholly like that? Does it seem possible for one part of a society rise above while the other part remains shackled to the ground? Without a doubt, steps towards progress could only be taken by both sexes moving forward and working together side by side as fellows. Only then the revolution would succeed. Only then the revolution Ataturk imagined throughout the whole process could succeed, by men and women working and moving forward side by side as fellows, not one side following the other one. That's what he said on August of 1925. And he also, in the same speech, he also underlines something which is interesting. He gives credit to all the steps taken until then, but he also underlines that the need to be bolder, more audacious in those steps. While the party he founded and the people he founded it with was against that. So we could just say he was a visionary, he was a trailblazer, even amongst the other trailblazers like him. And we could easily say, that's what I did deduce in my research, that he was alone in this topic and he had to choose his battles.
This is exactly what I mean by missing the context, being lacking in context.
Yeah.
I was just checking the developments of 1930, where Mustafa Kemal led the foundation of an opposition party against his own party. Very similarly to what happened to Women's People's Party. Something similar happened in 1930 as well. After the global economic crash in 1929, Turkey was absolutely affected. There is this myth that we were taught as children that Turkey was not affected by the 1929 world economic crisis simply because Ataturk was in power. That is not correct. Turkey was thoroughly affected. And Mustafa Kemal's first instinct, who had been busy with establishing complete authority over the politics of the country, and who had crushed all of his opposition up until then, after the economic crisis, his first instinct was to found an opposition party against his own party that he had founded in 1923 after the Turkish War of Independence was to, again, found an opposition party who would defend liberal views as opposed to his own party's atheist views. Could be considered an experiment or as a way of distracting the public or as a way of letting the public blow off some steam. But memoirs and documents from the era show that Mustafa Kemal, at least personally, was genuine in attempting to establish a multi-party political environment in Turkey.
Yeah.
After the world economic crisis, this man's first instinct was to found an opposition party, whereas he had been ruling unopposed as the president of the republic and as the leader of the...
He could easily have continued, considering the international atmosphere in the 1930s. No one would bat an eye if he did that.
And that wasn't my point. The point is, what foiled his attempt at creating a multi-party electionary or political system in Turkey?
Political system, yeah.
Yeah. What foiled his attempt was his own party's dissent from being criticized and opposed to throughout the country, because Turkey was a poor country, it was a developing country, it was a revolutionary country. If you give democracy a chance, people will complain. His own party eventually led to the dissolution of Mustafa Kemal's opposition party. And we know, again, from memoirs, that did not belong to Mustafa Kemal, not Mustafa Kemal's own memoirs, that he was genuinely sad that the attempt was a failure. He really wanted to see how a multi-party election system or political system would have worked in Turkey. Gawrych tells the story, and he tells the story accurately, mostly, but the part where Mustafa Kemal is sad that it didn't work out, how genuine he was in it, is missing.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm criticizing the book for not having written it, essentially.
I get it. And also, I get why you said things that are missing add up to something. Yeah, they do, correctly.
So, all in all, it is I think it's around 300 pages, 250 or 300 pages. It is not the most comprehensive, the longest, or the most thorough biography of Ataturk you will see.
Mm-hmm.
In some respects, it's better than its predecessors, at least when it comes to, I don't know, Patrick Kinross's biography. But I'm not a big fan of Patrick Kinross's biography, and in some respects,
we see that.
in some other respects, Patrick Kinross's biography can be superior to this one. And there are, I don't know, 60 years between them.
Yeah.
Around. Something.
Give or take. Yeah, give or take.
As a relatively short biography of Ataturk, you can read it, you will walk away with some idea of Ataturk in spirit, and it will not be historically inaccurate in essence, but it may be lacking, and in some context, or in some contexts, it may let you down if you have to, again, contextualize and approach the period or the man within a certain paradigm or within certain parameters. A question I wrote down was, who should read it? Newcomers, if this isn't the only book they read about the period, newcomers could read it, but probably I haven't read Andrew Mango's biography from start to finish, but seeing as how much more thorough it is and how much more well established it is. Probably starting off with that is a better idea.
Yeah.
Again, we
And
have
also,
a problem.
I think this, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I don't think this is an ideal for the newcomers, but more like seasoned readers like us, you know.
Seasoned readers or
Because
experts
it
or
gives us a different perspective than previous resources we've encountered. That's why I was, you know,
is
more
it completely groundbreaking or innovative in its
no,
approaches or
no, no, not whatsoever.
So who should read it? Who would really benefit from it? Again, if you need to do a very thorough literature review, you could read it. If you're a researcher, you could benefit from it. But who would really benefit from it would be Turkish graduate students or graduate students who were, or undergraduate students, but who still focus on the
Turkish
period.
history, yeah.
Yeah, the foundation of the Republic of Turkey. Because you would see how different kinds of biographies would be written, how different kinds of approaches would have been put forward through the reader.
Mm-hmm.
So it could make sense to read it if you're a graduate student focusing on the period. Other than that, for the newcomers, I wouldn't really recommend it. For the, as you said, seasoned readers, it doesn't really offer much. Is it a good book? It's not a bad book.
Okay, yeah.
I've read worse. So there are
So did
some
I.
aspects of it that are absolutely noteworthy. The general historical narrative does have merit. It's not inaccurate. I don't have any essential complaints about it.
Thank you so much, John, for bringing Gawrych's recent work to us and thoroughly criticizing it without going too much further. And thank you for all the viewers for bearing with us throughout our first edition of History After All in English. Good night and see you all.
And watch the space. We will be putting out more videos in English. And if you care to learn Turkish to watch our other videos, then that would be extremely helpful and it would make us extremely happy. Good night.
Okay. Görüşmek üzere.
Take care.